Air, are you there, sir?
I am, Michael. How are you?
Pretty good. I apologize if I'm not saying your name perfectly. I have a little bit of cold going on right now, so hopefully I can say it right. Walter Cruttenden. Cruttenden?
That's great. Yeah, that's how I say it.
Okay. So, and I appreciate you coming onto the show because it is 7:30 where you live, and it's 9:30 where I live. So I appreciate you waking up early and coming on the show and let me interview you, sir.
It's a beautiful morning here, so you fire away, Michael.
Yes, sir. What is a theoretical archaeoastronomer? What is that?
Well, astronomy, of course, we all know what that is, and archaeoastronomy deals with the alignment of ancient structures, such as, Avebury megalith, dolmens, cairns. You find these megalithic alignments or alignments of structures built prior to about 1500 BC. A very high correlation are either aligned with cardinal points or with solstices, or sometimes a few stellar arrangements. But it was something very common in the ancient world, and so we look at these things and try to figure out what the ancients were thinking and why they built them that way. And so we look at them from a number of angles and try to develop theories for them. So that's what we do here.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool name. Throughout the interview, if you can't hear me very well, just let me know. Because yesterday when I was interviewing William Henry, my Skype connection just lost connection. I have no idea why I just lost connection. Maybe it's from the signal, but because it fluctuates every now and then, but rarely, well, pretty much all the time I have a strong signal. But just let me know if I start having a weak signal.
Sounds real good here, Michael. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. I have to tell you, it has to take courage to do what you're doing because I'm sure that you're getting blasted by the mainstream astronomers.
Well, some of them, the only point of disagreement really is regarding the cause of precession. And yes, the mainstream guys say what they're taught in school, which is that the Earth precesses or wobbles due to the forces placed on it by the gravity of the sun and the moon. And
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, the sun and the moon certainly have gravitational effects and likely cause nutation, Chandler wobble, these local short period things, but there's no evidence that they actually cause the precession of the equinox, which is this very long motion of the sun, that we see from Earth. We see the sun move across the sky at about 50 arc seconds per year. And the reason, we just don't think has to do with changes in the Earth. We think it has to do with the actual solar system moving through space, curving through space. And that happens to fit with what the ancients talked about. But there's good modern evidence that indeed that's the case.
Yeah. What is this binary star that is right outside of our solar system?
Well, that's, a lot of people are looking at that or theorizing that. For example, Richard Muller, astronomer up at UC Berkeley, coined the term nemesis, and that he thinks there's something out there that now and then kicks up comets, but that it hasn't been identified. And Whitmire and Matisse, actually I think they might be down in your neck of the woods, University of Louisiana, think the same thing, that it has to do with shaping the Oort cloud that goes around the outside of the solar system. And so there's a lot of guys sort of thinking there might be something out there. Dan Brown recently, he's at Caltech, and he talked about Sedna, and he said that just in an article the other day that Sedna's orbit is very unusual and it shouldn't be there, This is this new
Yeah.
planetoid discovered about the size of Pluto, way out there. And he said, there's just no way to put it where it is unless there's something else acting on it. And so nobody really is sure what that body might be, because there's two schools of thought. One
Is it possible that it could be Planet X or Nibiru, as the ancient Sumerians talked about?
I don't think so. From my reading of the ancient myth and folklore and texts, that there's just a couple of references to Nibiru, and I think Nibiru means the star Sirius. It really seems to always point to the brightest star in the skies. So there's really two schools of thought. A lot of the folks say, well, if there is a companion to our sun, and most stars do have companions, it's over 60% of all stars have these binaries, or they're in multiple systems, then they would think it's a brown dwarf or maybe a red dwarf towards the galactic center, or some planet-like mass that is very difficult to see. And others, think, well, it could even be a visible star, but that would require that the solar system's moving a lot faster than we think it is, and maybe that MOND, this modified Newtonian gravity theory, might be in effect. And so people are just in the early stages of sort of trying to figure out what object might be gravitationally attracted to our sun, if indeed there is a companion.
What is the Great Year?
So the Great Year, then, yes, is this was Plato's term for this precession of the equinox. So, Mike, really, ancient cultures all over the world spoke of this vast cycle of time with alternating dark and golden ages. And Plato called it the Great Year, but the Indians called it the Yuga cycle. The Greeks referred to the specific ages, saying we go through an iron, bronze, silver, and golden age, and then back down, golden, silver, bronze, and iron. The Indians broke it into Kali Yuga, Dwapara, Treta, Satya, and other cultures just called these epochs of the Great Year, worlds or suns. I think that was the term that the Hopis use worlds and the Maya use suns. But there's over 40 myths, these are from different cultures, that make reference to this idea that history, really consciousness, goes up and down and in sync with this motion of the stars that we now call the precession of the equinox. And so that is the Great Year, this huge cycle of time that affects consciousness on a vast scale.
Very nice. Is our solar system orbiting around the star?
Yes, according to some, and our research indicates that, if there is a Great Year, which we believe there's a lot of evidence for it, and we can get into some of that later, then it has to have a cause. And all this ancient folklore pointed to a celestial cause. And, sure enough, if you look at just the common celestial motions that we're all aware of, they produce cycles. So, for example, the Earth spins on its axis every 24 hours. It produces the cycle of day and night. Because our bodies are adapted to, this Earth and these changes, we actually change consciousness. We go from a waking consciousness to a sleeping consciousness.
Exactly.
And back again, every single day because of this simple celestial motion. And, it affects a lot of life, activity and activity. And then the second celestial motion, of course, well known as the Earth goes around the sun at a slight tilt. And again, this has a huge effect. It, plants and spring out of the ground and bloom and give their fruit and then decay again, trillions of them. And other things migrate, spawn, hibernate. You know, they go through these huge changes simply because of a celestial motion. So indeed, Michael, if there's a third celestial motion, the whole solar system going around another star, you would expect that there is some cycle related to it. But if indeed it happens on such a long scale, such as the precession of the equinox, you know, which is, you know, more than 24,000 years the way we monitor it right now, then the change would be so slow, you know, we'd hardly even notice it in our lifetimes. But that's exactly the type of change that the ancient cultures talked about throughout their myth and folklore.
How fast is the solar system moving through the universe?
Well, you know, a lot of people would say compared to what? You know, it's not exactly like there's anything stationary out there.
It seems like our galaxy, precisely, is, it's like we're all moving away from something. Explain what we are moving away from, because not just our galaxy, but other galaxies, we're moving away from something. Is it from where the universe began, or what is it, sir?
Well, that's part of the sort of the Big Bang theory that all the galaxies are slowly moving away from each other. Not so slowly; it's actually supposed to be accelerating. But within our galaxy, you know, which is huge, estimated to be 400 billion stars just in our one galaxy here, Milky Way galaxy, the solar system has motion. The local clusters have motion. You know, the stellar neighborhoods groups have motion. And it looks like, you know, all the stars, all these clusters and neighborhoods also go around the center of the galaxy. And so when you talk about how fast is the solar system moving, you know, there's one thing might be how fast it moves compared to some of the local stars, how fast it moves compared to the cluster, how fast it moves compared to the galactic center. And it's actually a matter of debate out there.
Yeah.
Certainly it moves faster than the Earth moves around the sun, which is, you know, we can measure that because we know how long a year takes. That's 66,000 miles an hour. And I've heard estimates for solar system motion at anywhere from, you know, 10 kilometers a second to 500 kilometers a second. And I believe it's towards the higher end. I really like the work of a astrophysicist in Australia, Reg Cahill, and he measures it relative to the cosmic microwave background, the CMB, and I think that's a pretty good way to look at it.
Explain to some of the new people that might be into this, that might just start getting to this research that you're into. Explain what this precession of the equinox is.
Sure. Yeah. So Copernicus, you know, the Polish scientist back in 1400s, was there at the, you know, as we were coming out of the Dark Ages. He said the Earth had three motions, and we just talked about the first two. It spins on its axis.
Yeah.
Goes around the sun. That's a day and a year. Well, and he said that it also that it librates or it wobbles. And he said that because when you look at the position of the sun, which he assumed was fixed, it would be in a different place in the sky each equinox. It would precess. It would move backwards relative to the background stars. And it only moves slightly, just 1 degree every 72 years. But at that rate, you know, in roughly 24,000 or 26,000 years, it will go completely in a circle. But since he didn't think the sun moved, he said the Earth must be wobbling. That's what must be causing this. And so Newton came along and said, well, gee, if the Earth wobbles, it must be due to the gravity of the sun and the moon tugging on the Earth. And in Newton's time, they also didn't know that the sun moves or the solar system moves. But the theory has stuck, so everyone's assumed that this precession of the equinox, when we look, say, on the date of the equinox at the position of the sun, that it's slightly moving across the sky.
Yeah.
All the theories are that it must be due to a wobbling Earth. But now that we know the solar system moves, there's few people starting to come up with this theory that, it could be partially due to the sun actually moving across the sky because we're all in motion.
There's a member that's in the chat room right now. He's an amateur astronomer, and he's also a member at my site, theufobunker.com. He asked, is our binary friend visible with the telescope, maybe with longer exposure photography?
People are looking for it, yeah, and using some pretty good instruments. And we have found some of these small planetoids, Sedna, Xena, things like this that are beyond Pluto, fairly close to our solar system relative to a dim star. But
yeah,
it could be, but or it's very visible. For example, you mentioned Nibiru, which was this ancient name for the star Sirius. If we were in a binary system, way out there somewhere, one that we see, in most cases the companion to our sun would be just the most visible, brightest star out there. And Sirius is that star. It's 3 times brighter than the next brightest star. And so, yes, some say that might be the companion, and of course that requires that the solar system be going very fast, and obviously that one would be easy to see through a telescope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How could this star possibly influence the rise and fall of civilizations? I find this fascinating when I heard you talk about this on Coast to Coast.
Sure. So we just talked about how, these first simple celestial motions cause these massive changes in the way life works on planet Earth, called seasons, and just the daily spin of the Earth actually changes our consciousness from going to waking to sleeping every single day because our bodies are adapted to it. So too would there be some adaptation going on if we're going around another stellar object. And all stellar objects are huge generators of electromagnetic spectrum. And this is not just visible light. We see the visible light from the sun, but it also emits X-rays, gamma rays, radio waves, the whole spectrum from ultraviolet to infrared. And it has an effect on our ionosphere, magnetosphere, etc. And I think 10 years ago, everyone thought that, well, another star really wouldn't have any effect on us. And it was about that time that somebody noticed that we'd occasionally have these blackouts of ham radios. You know how they occur?
Yeah.
And they usually happen because of solar storms, especially these X-class flares. But somebody noticed that it happened now and then on the night side of the Earth when we weren't facing the sun. And so they tracked it down and realized that other stars are having, gamma ray bursts and things like this that indeed fry our ionosphere a little bit and affect us. So we do know that other stars affect us, and if in fact we are going around one on a regular basis, then you can start to understand, and I'm not claiming that we know all the science and all the mechanics behind it, but we can start to understand that there would have some effect there. It would influence life here in sync with that cycle, and that's exactly what the ancients said.
how many and what type of cycles are there altogether in this 26,000 year cycle?
Oh, that's an interesting topic. And this is really where a lot of myth and folklore comes into play because,
Yeah, it's fascinating.
yeah, they would say, the Earth inward and outwardly goes through this complete metamorphosis in this 12,000 years on your way up and 12,000 years on your way down. As a matter of fact, there's some indication that our current system of time, 24 hours, with 12
Yeah.
hours of AM increasing light, 12 hours of PM increasing darkness, is actually a little microcosm of this great year with its 24,000 years, 12,000 ascending, 12,000 descending. Anyway, they broke the 12,000 years into 4 stages, and I'll use the Greek terms because we're all familiar with them, which
Okay.
is the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age.
Yeah.
In the Iron Age, they would say, that's the age of man, when mankind is only aware of just the most material aspects. He just thinks he's a body walking around on a solid earth, and he has no knowledge of molecules, atoms, any finer forces whatsoever. And then in the Dwapara age, that's the Indian term for it, but the Bronze, supposedly mankind becomes aware of the next level of creation. And so, we were in a higher age, we went down to the low ages, the classical dark age, and then the Renaissance, that's a French term for rebirth of the cycle.
Yeah.
We started to gain additional knowledge as the cycle's going back up. And sure enough, exactly what some of these old Indian tales talk about, we discover what they call finer forces. And, we discover electricity and magnetism, and we see that, solid matter isn't that solid after all, that it's made of molecules and atoms, and those themselves we learned just recently, in the last 100 years or so, that atoms are made out of even smaller things, and that they're mostly just space, energy in space. And so there is some basis to think that, the way they describe these ages, there might be some truth to it. And then, of course, these higher ages, because we haven't lived through them, we don't know, but they claim that, they're just incredible, that things effectively just keep getting more and more ethereal to us as our consciousness grows. And so the myth and folklore about the Silver and Golden Age, the age of demigods and gods, is pretty amazing.
What age are we in right now?
We'd be in the just coming out of the grossest material age, which the Indians called the Kali Yuga, and roughly with the Renaissance. And so you can put it anywhere from 1400 to 1700. We come out of this just gross material age where nations at war with one another, and science is in a really low state, and a lot of people still can't read and write, and until we're in this just the early part of what the Indians called the Dwapara Yuga, or Bronze Age. But we're still early, real early.
Could the Mayans, is that what they were trying to tell us, that 2012, or I guess around 2012, is going to be another age?
That could be. The Mayans, of course, the actual written information about 2012, it's just on one stela down at Zappa, I guess. There's very little written information, so we kind of have to go with some of the myth and folklore of the Mayan elders, and they have these sort of different opinions on it. But it does sound like a myth and folklore regarding a changing age, that they're talking about, that we're coming into a higher time where we're becoming aware enough that the world's really starting to change a lot. And so, yeah, I've heard that interpretation quite a bit, that the Mayan 2012 reference is a reference to that we're kind of high enough in this next ascending age that mankind begins to wake up and, you know, see his potential and make a better world finally.
Because how materialistic can we get? Like, how much more materialistic can we get than we already are, you know?
Well, it was pretty bad just, you know, 500 years ago when, in fact, every nation was at war with one another. If the lifespan was half of what it was, man, if you did anything wrong, it was pretty, you know, you're killed on the spot or tortured.
And a guillotine and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, the world was in a very, very bad place. And so, you know, still many people are very material, and we depend on material things, no question about it. But I'd say there's also sort of in the background a budding interest in new ways of looking at life and spirituality, you know, and in types of
I totally agree.
Yeah. So
it's just I feel like I'm an optimistic person, but I feel like just like you said, it's true. But it seems like people are still in the shallow end. They're afraid. They're afraid to go in the deep end because of ridicule, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, these things change slowly, and you know, as we go back towards the Dark Age, we see, you know, you have to look really in 500 or 1,000-year increments to see significant change versus just going back a few years. It's hard to notice.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you know, if you look at the ancient archaeological sites, such as, you know, Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, or the Indus Valley, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and, you know, even Egypt and Peru, 5,000 years ago, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, we find evidence of, you know, they're building massive structures, they're trading very far, they have a knowledge of astronomy, geometry, indoor plumbing. They found at Harappa and also in much of Mesopotamia, you know, advanced agricultural systems, and all this stuff just completely goes away to where, you know, we can hardly build anything in the Dark Ages, and you know, most people don't even have a sense of learning. And so, yeah, we may not see the changes in short periods of time, but if you look long periods of time, it looks pretty clear that there was an ancient, fairly advanced culture around the world. It sort of dissipated as you go towards the Dark Ages, and now we're getting more clever with technology and things like that as we go back up. And that to me is just a manifestation of our expanded consciousness, our cleverness.
I totally agree. There's a question now in the chat room. There's talk of gravitational pull that is unexplained, that is tugging on the outer planets. This could be the result of a failed star out there somewhere. Something like this would probably been somewhere in the plane of our system. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So, okay, so this sounds like a pretty informed listener you have there.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, you know, if it was really close, and I think the rule of thumb is if there's a companion, it has to be at least 5 times the distance of the farthest planet, or it's going to wreak pretty good havoc on and perturbing the solar system bodies. And your listener's right. The farther out you go, the weirder things seem to be acting, indicating that there is something out there. And, and what was the tail end of his comment there?
I'm going to get to it. So the tail end was this could be the result of a failed star out there somewhere. Something like this would probably been somewhere in the plane of our system.
Yes. say, so it would, we do think that it's probably maybe not right on the plane, because there are perturbations that you see. For example, the farther out you go, both Pluto is off plane by about 17 degrees or so, and so is Sedna, with a very similar, but longer orbit period, of course. And so my guess is that it's within 20 degrees or so of the plane, but it might be off enough to be actually causing Pluto and Sedna and some of these planetoids way out there to be in the position that they're in.
Okay, now this next question that I have for you it's something I really want to know. How come we tend to act a certain way physically, emotionally, spiritually, and even technologically when we are in a certain cycle? How does each cycle affect our consciousness?
Well, these are things that people are just starting to study, and the best research I've seen that might start to explain it. Are you familiar with SAD? It's what's that stand for? Seasonal something disorder, but it's when
I've heard of that film.
Yeah, if certain people don't get enough light, they just get super depressed.
Yeah.
And it has an effect there. And there's some research going on. It was done by Dr. Valerie Hunt at UCLA. She's a physiologist, and she wanted to see, how invisible things like the electromagnetic spectrum in which we all live might affect us that we're unaware of.
Yeah.
And so she's kind of looking into SAD and some related stuff. And so what she did, she put some people in something called a Faraday cage, which is they use these things to build really sensitive electronics when they want to block out all the ambient, television waves, microwaves, all the stuff that's going through the atmosphere right now where we are, to build really sensitive circuits. But she was using it for physiology. She put them in there, had them take some tests, and what she found out that when people were completely isolated in this room, that they're actually isolated from the Earth's natural electromagnetic field that we live in, for lack of a better term. And people not only did poorly on the tests that she gave them, statistically speaking, 10 to 20% worse.
Yeah.
But people wanted to get out of the room. They were jumpy, nervous, depressed. A couple of them even cried, and they didn't know why they were crying. And we found the same thing with some of the early astronauts. When they're separated from the sort of the cocoon of the Earth's field, if you will, they get kind of down and depressed, and so they put negative ion generators now in spaceships or spacecraft to help counteract this effect. And so she found the same thing, that you could, if you sort of pump up the electromagnetic field in the room with just more negative ions, people felt really good, and these are naturally generated around waterfalls and the shore or the ocean, things like this. So there are these subtle things that affect us, and if they're going on a huge scale, then we're going to be subtly affected and hardly even know it. And so, Michael, I don't understand all the mechanisms, but I think there's just a whole lot of stuff we don't know that's actually happening out there, and science will get better over the years.
Well, what I like about your research is that you look at things and you research things that not the mainstream, I guess, academia or scientists or or astronomers are researching or looking into. And I believe to have a better picture of the whole, or to understand the whole picture better, you need to understand every little aspect. Not just like the Big Bang or a black hole, or to have a better picture, you got to understand the whole mechanism, how things work. And I believe, for reading a few of your articles and listening to you on Coast to Coast, that's what made me want to interview you, because you're right on, in my opinion, with my own personal research. And thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we do believe that a multidisciplined approach is best, versus a specialization in a particular science is certainly the way to develop that science. But we do need both, and that's where we focus.
Is it possible that this binary star could be changing our DNA to be more advanced conscious beings?
Again, I'm not sure how it works. I do think that there's some electromagnetic effect, for lack of a better term, that is occurring, and I don't know if that actually changes our DNA. Maybe it does over a long enough period of time.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody knows for sure.
Explain how important does the moon play an effect on our consciousness?
People have talked about that for years because, at full moon, supposedly you have this phenomena, where lunatics come out. That's where that term comes from, people that get strange tics around the time of full moon. Obviously, it affects our tides. But I think, we're still close to the material ages, so we're trying to look for something, something really physical in the ways it can affect us. And I don't think it's been well identified yet. Some people say there is a correlation to lunar phases, and other people say there's not. So I'm just not sure of the research. It is interesting, though, when you look at some of the myth and folklore, say about the next age, the pre-Babel age, we find it's even written about in the Bible. Before Babel, mankind spoke with one tongue, communed with nature. There was the myth and folklore points to a very harmonious time on the planet Earth. Hesiod wrote about this, the famous Greek historian. And then Babel were building towers, and so we can date that to about 3000 BC or so. And then supposedly God confuses the tongues, and it's kind of all downhill from there. Babylon, Mesopotamia just turned to dust. They go to a nomadic society over the next few thousand years. And needless to say, we all speak with different languages. Well, some of the researchers I talked to look at that myth and compare it to what the Indian saints and sages talk about, where they say, as we get farther into the future, another couple thousand years, we will redevelop our intuition, telepathy, that sort of thing. And they say that telepathy and clairvoyance will once again be common knowledge. And so that might be one change where, we begin to use senses and abilities that are dormant in us right now that come alive again when we're in the right, part of the cycle, the right stellar environment, if you will.
Yeah. Hopefully, I get reincarnated to that era, so I'd like to experience that. But are we past due for the Earth to flip on its axis? And if it did, would life cease to exist here on Earth?
Yeah, we hear a lot about these axial changes, and I do think it's important to be aware that the axis is moving slightly all the time. This Chandler wobble just a little bit, and the magnetic pole moves quite a bit. It actually moves anywhere from 10 to 40 kilometers a year. So just in my lifetime, I think it's gone through Canada and Alaska and Siberia, parts of Siberia. So that does change, obviously, the magnetic pole every year slightly without it having a huge effect on us. And then geologists tell us that it completely shifts on average, just the magnetic pole, every 600,000 to 700,000 years. And they can tell this by looking at the polarity of stones, just with a magnetometer. And so that changes, and that, if the magnetic poles flip, yeah, that would seem to have a great effect on, the way birds migrate, and because they kind of tune into these magnetic globes.
Yeah.
And animals and things. So that would be interesting. As far as the actual spin axis of the Earth, that's pretty hard to change, and there's really no evidence that that's had any big changes. And Hapgood and some people like this sort of had theorized that the whole crust of the Earth sort of moved around it like the peel of an orange would move around the orange if you loosened it all up. But when you look at archipelagos, the geology of the Aleutians or the Hawaiian Islands, they're moving very slowly across the surface of the Earth as the new islands are formed. So assuming that's the same hotspot, it would indicate that the crust does move, but this plate tectonics is very slow.
How did the Mayans learn how to map the stars perfectly? Is it possible that extraterrestrial beings, or what some may call, like Zecharia Sitchin, ancient astronauts, possibly taught the Mayans how to read the stars?
Well, certainly they had very clear skies in ancient times, and so
yeah.
I find a lot of ancient cultures were really tuned into the stars. Much of the early mythology is about stars. So that's one thing. If we have 400 billion stars just in our galaxy, and we're finding planets around many stars at a very rapid rate, then I don't think it's a big jump to believe that there's got to be other life out there. Jeepers, I'm with you on that. Whether or not they come here in little tin flying saucers, I don't know, but my guess is that the Earth's probably been influenced that way, but I don't really buy into Sitchin's stuff that it's a major effect, because I believe that it's just part of the natural cycle. As we talk about, these celestial motions are the major effect. If it was just one alien race or something, I think you'd have a different effect.
Yeah. Tell us what the Antikythera mechanism is.
Oh yeah. So that's a device, which we look at all these archaeological discoveries. We have these news tags, and so every day, whatever comes up, we try to check it out, and we're looking for evidence that's sort of out of place in history. Because if there is a cycle, there should be things that we've just recently discovered that went away in the Dark Ages and existed long before. And so precision geared devices were not developed until the great clockmaking era, 12, 13, 1400 in Europe. And sponge divers in Greece and around the year 1900 found a shipwreck. And in that shipwreck, they found this huge corroded mass of stuff, coins, amphora, and something that they thought was an anchor. And so they put it in the Athens Museum. They found it in the Aegean Sea off an island called Antikythera. And so they call it the Antikythera device. Anyway, this anchor-type object was moved once, and it broke open, and they realized, oh, this is a very fine precision, almost a computer, really, to map the motion of the known planets and stars, or planets and moon and sun, and these gears are really finely developed, and yet we know for certain, because of the coins and everything that are corroded into this thing, that it has to be at least 2,000 years old, and probably older than that. And so it's really out of place to find a precision-geared device object, 1,500 years before gears are even invented, developed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's just one thing. Man, you find, all sorts of things out there like that, which I'd be happy to talk about if we have time.
We have, let me see, about 7 minutes remaining. What about Stonehenge? Is it some sort of calculator or some sort of device used to map the stars, or what was Stonehenge built for, in your opinion, in your research, sir?
I don't know, but I sure don't buy the sort of the standard theory we were taught in school, and that is that.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, that here we are, struggling hunter-gatherers that can barely get enough food to survive, and therefore there's no cities or anything. So we need a clock to tell us when to plant our crops.
Yeah.
And so we go build one out of 50-ton stones. That many of these stones we have to move over 100 miles. And then align it. It's nonsense. So yeah, it does appear it has some astronomical purposes. The inner stones I know can be used to plot eclipse cycles. There's very good research on that. But I'm actually heading over there next month, early May, and going to do a little more research.
Nice. Are they allowed to let people inside of Stonehenge?
I don't think they let just the regular tourists come in, because they're concerned about people graffiti or chipping off pieces or whatever like that. But research groups go in now and then, so yeah, we'll be going in.
Well, I asked because I hear a lot of people say if you are allowed access inside the Stonehenge, that if you meditate, that it's a really good experience.
I'm going to try that. I love to meditate, and so we'll give that a shot. And we're also going to visit Avebury over there. Avebury is one of the largest stone henges. Some of the stones have been destroyed, some years ago, but I think there's still 66 stones, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And there's fascinating research there where a friend of mine, a scientist, he took a magnetometer to each of these stones to figure out the polarity. How we were talking earlier about, when stones are formed by the earth, they have a positive side and a negative side, however they're formed in relation to the pole. That's how they can tell whether or not the magnetic field of the earth changes. Well, so these stones, which were quarried, should be all in random polarity alignments, assuming the ancients don't know anything about magnetism or polarity. But what John Burke found was that he took over 1,000 readings over a month, that the stones are all carefully aligned so that the positive side, all faces in one direction, and the negative side of the stones all face in another direction. And so it's actually, the polarity of the stones is very similar to the Large Hadron Collider over in CERN, where we use magnets to all aligned in a circle so that they can speed up particles. It's a particles accelerator for physics experiments. I'm not saying they're doing physics experiments back at Avebury, but for some reason they knew how the polarity of the stones, and they aligned them in a certain arrangement, and we don't have a clue why they did it.
I know, it seems very fascinating that the pyramids, Stonehenge, and other great archaeological sites throughout the world from the ancient past. Many scientists and researchers say that they're all on, what's it called, ley lines? Is that the correct term? It's like
Yeah.
the energy grid of the Earth?
Yes. Again, this is a field where I think mainstream science is not buying into ley lines, and then some researchers that do say it's real, say it's very subtle energy. We do know that there are natural geophysical forces and energies formed. If you have two plates that are coming together,
Yeah.
or if you have underground water, you're going to have a measurable effect from above ground. And again, John Burke did that. He uses electrostatic voltometer to do this work, and it's too long to get into now. But he did find that many of the pyramids were built over energetic geophysical anomalies.
Yeah.
So that might have something to do with these ley lines. There's so much information that was lost in the last dark age. We're just starting to rediscover it.
Okay, we have a little under 90 seconds left. Where can people find your research, and where can people buy your book?
Sure. The book's available through Amazon.com is probably the easiest way, or you can Barnes and Noble still carries it, I believe, and they can easily order it for you. And our website is binaryresearchinstitute.org, and that has sort of just the astronomical evidence related to precession and the motion of the heavens, that sort of thing. We do have another one, thegreatyear.com, which we're developing, but it's not very deep yet.
Sir, I want to